on store productivity, customer experience, and strategies for building the modernized retail store that unlock long-term growth. We have a jam-packed agenda today. We'll look at first current adoption trends, key investment drivers, the impact on store performance, and strategies for implementation and road mapping the future success and scalability of this technology category. The insights following this slide and the rest of this presentation are based on a proprietary survey of 150 plus executives, as well as cross-industry perspectives and data that our team has collected. As a reminder, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A function at the top of your screen. And with that, I am very pleased to introduce our host, Deborah Weinswig, CEO and founder of Coresight Research. She'll be joined today by our esteemed guest, Dan Ludwig, Chief Product Officer at Elo Touch Solutions, and Chip Yeager, Vice President of Corporate Strategy at Zebra Technologies. Over to you, Deborah. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. So we're going to be really focusing on how do we define self-service in retail. To me, I think about it as, right, how can the consumer remove friction in their experience? And just in your mind's eye, if you think about it as you're walking through a store, where do you hit those friction points, and where can, self-service really alleviate that and cause you to feel differently about the retailer or the QSR or the hospitality, location that you're in? And so I think that is where we are in this kind of moment on the topic. We were talking before the call, we're kind of in the second inning here as it relates to the customer's mindset and the retailer, QSR, hospitality, and even banking, if you think about it. So I think before we jump in, this isn't about replacing, humans or people or anything like that. It's about augmenting the experience. There just isn't the reality that there can be an associate in every aisle at every place where the customer has a question. And so this idea that consumers can get the information that they need, they can get the help that they need, and it's seamless and frictionless, I think that's really critical. And so not only can you drive top line, but also bottom line. And I've been on the road this week, actually, in 2 cities. And I will tell you, I was surprised to hear, because it's certainly not the narrative that we're seeing in the news, about how difficult it is to hire right now. And I heard that from multiple people. And so I think that is a huge opportunity as we move ahead. And, especially in some of these roles where you still have 100+% turnover, even where I know the founders, or I know the CEOs, and I know they're running an amazing organization, right? We have people who are students, we have people who are moving, right? There are all kinds of reasons that we see turnover. And so I think that this really enables the consumer to have the experience that they want. And I think that's kind of where we're headed. So if we think about on the next slide, before we really kind of go deeper, first, I really want to thank Dan and Chip today. I think this is going to be an amazing conversation. I think it's a really important one to have. And I think at this point in time where we're trying to define what customer service is, it's also really critical. It's not just one technology. And from our research, only about 23% of retailers, I thought this was shocking actually, have fully scaled mature self-service solutions across their store fleets. Because if you think about it on the earnings calls, right, and we're kind of in the middle of earnings season, so many retailers talk about how important CX, customer experience, right? This whole idea around how the customer feels about their experience. And because everyone's so vocal these days and has so many outlets, this is something that retailers are very, I would say, is top of mind. At the same time, 80% of retailers do plan to invest or expand self-service over the next 24 months. I think because of some of these, let's just say, outlets that the consumer has to voice their opinions, but also because some of this technology like Elo is now readily available And I think brands and retailers can better understand what's ahead. So what's really interesting about this evolution is 3 distinct stages. Retailers are moving from simple checkout automation toward broader journey enablement and ultimately towards self-service as a connected store platform. And that's where these solutions not only provide touch points across the journey, but can also inform critical aspects of the retail operation, such as inventory, analytics, and more. So it's not just about a better experience, it's about better information and ultimately a better journey. And like I said, a higher ROI. So Dan, I want to address this first question to you. From Elo's perspective, how do you think about this shift from checkout automation to journey enablement? And why is it important that retailers think about self-service as a broader in-store capability rather than just a mode of payment?
Yeah, Deborah, thank you so much. It's awesome to be here. Just as a short introduction to say, it's great to have Elo and Zebra on the same stage, right? Because when we talk about self-service and customer interaction, over the decades, that's been Elo's specialty, but it's nice to partner with our combined effort here to have this discussion. But I would say in terms of the stages that you mentioned here and what's on the page of self-service, you're right to frame it as a progression. But I think what's really important is to look at what's underneath that progression. You know, when these types of solutions came to market, it was about checkout, a single point solution. It was about speed and efficiency and cost reduction and really queue management and things of that nature. As we scale here, you mentioned the low level of scale here at 23%. It really is all about the enablement of the shopper's journey. So everything from product discovery, that's specifications, it's, what's available, what's in store, or endless aisle where maybe products are not in store, but you want to see the full complement of a portfolio of potential products, things that'll solve your problem as a shopper. Buy online, pick up in store, returns, assisted selling. These are all about stops on a journey. And so consistency, reliability, and integration across all of these touch points is really critical as we scale here. Merchants really have to think about beyond a device, right? And think about not a device or a point solution, but a fleet of connected experiences. So once we get that kind of enablement thinking going in self-service, the potential is limitless for how to engage customers, how to speed time to revenue, increase basket size. So that's really what the scaling journey is all about here as we move forward.
No, that's really helpful. I think the product discovery piece is so important. And, in so many cases, brands and retailers assume that the customer comes in, right, with a list in mind. From a lot of the work that we've done, that's under 50%. So there's this huge opportunity, right, not only to upsell, but also to help the customer find something that maybe was on their list for another retailer. So I think that's really important. So Chip, as we think about stage 3 from an operational and strategic perspective, how do these digital enhancement opportunities and engagement opportunities, how do they impact a retailer or a brand?
Thanks, Deborah. And again, I'll echo what Dan said. It's really great to be here. It's great to be with you guys talking through this really important research. I think it's interesting to even use the term self-service as a platform, because that's kind of where we have to go or are getting to now. You think about all the touch points and all the customer challenges that Dan just talked through that self-service can address. These are now across the customer journey, and every one of these interactions is generating some level of data. And every one of these interactions needs to be integrated in some way, shape, or form with either point of sale or loyalty or checking inventory. I mean, there's integration points. And so, I mean, we don't even have to talk about AI, but think about how AI can benefit from seeing all the journey across all those touch points. So we're increasingly getting to a concept that says we need to get to a platform approach here. And these things all need to work together. It's not okay for us to kind of take a consumer grade, fragmented, hey, I found something, let's try this over here kind of approach. If you're really going to get the benefit of what seeing and managing that whole customer journey can do across all these self-service touch points, you have to think of it as a scalable platform. And so the retailers we're talking to, they are increasingly looking for something that is commercial grade, that is purpose built, that each point of interaction is really designed to give the kind of experience that consumers expect. Ideally, they want to see standardization across the store. They want to make sure that applications that they make or interfaces that they create can be plugged into multiple points along that self-service journey. Even better, they would really like to see it if they can manage all these touch points in a seamless, single pane of glass kind of approach, where it's really a platform that, there are all kinds of touch points, but we know one central place to go to make sure that everything is up to date and everything is secure and everything gets the latest information. And then ideally, you want to pull this into that broader ecosystem of software and payments and AI partners that you want to work with. So this idea of self-service as a platform, I think, is a really important one. And I think that's why people say, hey, 23% can say that they feel like they're getting to that point. But obviously, the vast majority of customers really don't feel that they're there yet.
Chip, I'm going to ask you a follow-up. Don't you think, too, this whole idea of self-service as a platform, that once they get to a certain point, they're going to also realize the additional opportunities to serve that customer in store, and that we're going to start to have this divide where customers feel that their needs are taken care of, that the friction is removed, and then those retailers, brands, QSR, hospitality that don't, isn't that kind of where we're at? And I feel like we're at a pivotal moment right now.
There's different types of buyers out there, different types of customers. And we all know customers that only want to work with a live person, and that's just their comfort level. But increasingly, I think the majority of the folks that are coming in, they look for things to be efficient. They look for access to know all the choices they have. They look for consistency in the way that the store knows them and knows their preferences and knows what other business that they've done. And there are, when that works well, it gives a higher level of experience that people take that expectation and they move to other retailers. And the ones that can pass that bar are the ones that they'll go back to. So, I do think your point is right, that, customers are looking at these interface points and saying, what is my experience today with this retailer? And is it the type of thing that drives me to come back?
Oh, that makes a ton of sense. And I think, for us, we always look at kind of what's already in market and then just kind of starting to think about the TAM, which is enormous. If you think about, these are some of the largest retailers in the world. And right, I think to me, the target numbers are some of the most interesting, because self-checkout is driving 10% faster transaction times, improving net promoter scores, and they're going to continue to expand. And what we're seeing, there's been a lot of concern over some of the self-checkout, but I think with where technology is now, and you talked about kind of, what AI can see, that is transforming. I spent some time at NRF APAC with the Zebra team, and it was one of the, I will say, it's not often that you're at a show and someone shows you a technology and you're like, it really was transformational in my thinking about the opportunity. And I think the acquisition of Elo, I could see where things were going, and Elo was really critical to make that whole kind of journey work. And I think we're just at, it goes back to, these are the largest retailers in the world. right? And so you've got Costco Scan and Go at 27 locations. You've got Ahold, right, 700 stores, right? We're still talking small numbers. And so the opportunity, I think this is a 26, 27, this idea of kind of, customer enablement, journey improvement, that we're there, right? The technology is available. Now it's a matter of thinking about how to almost anticipate consumer needs and then make those investments in order to kind of take care of them. And so I think as we look at what's driving adoption, I am not somebody who, I do everything I can to not have friction in, in shopping and in life in general. And when you think about it, I mean, to me, it was interesting that these numbers are all pretty much the same, because if you think about it, it can be hard to find the right product. It can be hard to figure out what aisle it might be in. Sometimes I just need someone else to make the decision, right? Is it A or B? They both look the same to me. And so and I will say a lot of our research shows, once again, with these technologies, I feel that what retailers and brands think, there's just another side to it. So at checkout, we had found through our research that people who are 65 and over prefer to do self-checkout because they find that the human checkers go too fast and they can't check the prices. And so, right, but that's not what people would think. And so I think that the opportunity to kind of grow the pie is really kind of right before us. And, as we think about, discovery, evaluation, confidence to purchase, and whatever we can do to also drive down returns by presenting additional information at the point of sale, I just think that we're in a very interesting kind of AI-powered environment. And retailers all want to talk about on their earnings calls, right? We're doing this in AI, we're doing that. But the ROI is difficult to measure. But I think here we've got a very strong way to measure ROI. And so, Dan, how do you interpret this data from a customer behavior perspective? And does it tell you that there are friction points kind of across the journey or something more?
Yeah, it's funny. When you read research about self-service in retail, there's so much focus on checkout, on self-checkout, SCO. And, I don't believe this is a checkout problem. This is a journey problem when we think about friction. By the time customers get to checkout, many of the key decisions and opportunities have been made, or more importantly, have been lost. So customers are really smart. They're really in tune with the various ways they can shop. They want real-time, contextual information, and they want it when they want it. So that means it has to be throughout the journey and throughout the store, just like they can get that information when they're online. So increasingly, as online avenues become more of the shopper's journey, many of the ways that customers think about shopping online have to be similar but enhanced, because shoppers are in a store for a reason, whether it's proximity or things they can't get online, or it's preference. And so it's just crucial that you have this real-time contextual information at their fingertips. I would also say, when we're talking about friction, you can't not talk about what Chip highlighted earlier, which is the platform, right? You need to think about, merchants, retailers need to think about this point of information, this point of interaction, multiple points, right? As a platform that are interconnected fleets with common technology interfaces, right? In my world as a product leader, I think about, the motherboards that we're using and the board support packages that enable common tools, whether you're in point of sale, whether you're at a loyalty kiosk, whether you're at a product information center, price checker, all of these things need to be managed, available, reliable, commercial grade, such that a retailer can optimize, make it feel like magic to a shopper. It's just always there, always working. It's there when they need it, all the rest.
I like magic. So
Yeah.
Speaking of, we magically have a lot of questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to kind of start to fold some of those in so that we get to everyone. So Andre asked, what is the projected adoption of these technologies in Latin America, and what cultural barriers might they face?
I'll take a shot at that, and I'll ask Chip to top me up, right? I do think that there are regional differences with customers, right? You've got different economies, you have different cultures, ways to interact. We are seeing that a self-assisted journey in retail is penetrating in Latin America. I have to say, however, that those customers that we have down there are very discerning in where they put their capital dollars, right? And so when we think about these journeys, it's all about proven ROIs, right? These particular merchants in emerging markets, they want to make sure that they are piloting and testing some of these interactive experiences, whether it's at any point in the journey, and they are really carefully establishing a repeatable ROI and expanding from there. But beyond that, these shopping experiences are pretty uniform. But there are differences. In Asia, self-service is extremely popular, right? And you have things like facial recognition and facial recognition payment, which is a way to interrupt checkout at the end. You can do it at any point in the store. And so that's a cultural difference that maybe isn't as accepted, say, here in North America or in the Americas in general.
Great. And we have a lot of questions, so I apologize in advance. We won't get to them all during the call, but we will follow up afterwards. Samuel asked, I have noticed many associates using their own device to look up items in the stores, in the warehouse, etc. Is this going to be the new reality, or do you see retailers stepping up with state-of-the-art devices for their associates to use?
Yeah, let me take that one. There's I think later in this deck we'll get to some of the statistics around self-service technologies, and using apps on smartphones is certainly one of the ways, and it has been a popular layer for a lot of retailers to put in because there's access both in the store and out of the store to is this available? Is it available today? Is it available at the store that I want to go to? Price comparisons, pre-ordering, that kind of, there's lots of different ways that can be used besides literally self-servicing inside the store. We also, though, know that there's plenty of customers, plenty of retailers that choose to provide a dedicated device when you walk into the store. And so you put in your loyalty card, you grab this device, and you walk around, and you scan as you go. Your cell phone is still available to take calls, take texts, do whatever you do to manage your daily life, but you have a running total in this device that allows you, and it's got a kind of ideally designed scanner that allows you to manage your basket, get through the process, even present you with coupons that you might not have gotten just based on what you've already put in the cart. So that is super popular over in Europe. Personal shopping kind of devices are really, really popular over there. Haven't caught on as fast in North America, but there's been plenty of people that have been working with them, and it is seeming to catch on a little further as we go. So I think both coexist really nicely.
All right, and Chip, another question for you. Can you help walk us through what you're seeing on the checkout and operations side?
Oh yeah, I mean, just being really quick on this. I mean, checkout is where a lot of self-service started, and it tends to still, we thought, if as long as we put those SCO checkout terminals over there, we're never going to have lines because people just whisk through. But what actually happens is people get stuck because they're buying alcohol, or this coupon didn't work, or something else, and the little light's going. You still need people to help manage those. So whether they're manned checkout or SCOs, we have to flex people over to where the lines are. And I know personally, and I'm sure all of us have experienced wanting to use self-checkout and being in a line for the self-checkout. So I think this is one of those places where stores are learning to be really agile with their employees. How do we take folks who can be picking orders or stocking shelves, but on a moment's notice come and help in the checkout and be really efficient there, as opposed to old school, go back, a decade or more, you were a dedicated checkout person, that's what you knew to do. I think now we've got that agility, but it means that we have to equip our frontline workers, our retail workers, with the right type of devices so that they get notified that they need to be where, what task they need to perform, communications if they've got questions. Those kind of investments are critical to enabling that agility.
Right. And on the next slide, we talk about, I love this slide. I could spend the whole hour here, but because I look at it, this is the AI powered store, and it's powered by self-service. So the consumer is in the driver's seat, if you will. And I think that that's a very important, right, to have the consumer at the center of everything we do versus having the retailer, right? Everyone talks about a customer first strategy, but I think Elo and Zebra are really enabling that. And I think this slide is the one that kind of helps for me to visualize that. And it's been interesting to talk to some of the chip companies about this technology and what will have the greatest impact, to the point of, right, how do we think about kind of smart carts? And I had an executive ask me, do people care about the prices of things? And I said, well, in some cases, right, 2/3 of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. I think it's 65%, so not exactly 2/3, just shy. And this idea that, right, you can really manage in real time. Secondly, there's been a lot of concerns over dynamic pricing. And so once again, with smart carts, right, if you put the item in your cart or with Scan and Go, and you're ringing up the price of that item at that time, the consumer, what we see is it kind of takes down their anxiety levels around the actual price of an item. And this starts to change the relationship between the retailer and the consumer, because the consumer has a lot more trust, if you will, in that experience. And so not only are they trying to bring down, right, their anxiety around like the friction, but also, is the price actually the price? And I think there continues to be a lot of, kind of questions there. And so, as we think about it from a customer experience perspective, Dan, why is it important to have these customer-facing digital interfaces across the in-store journey? And what happens when some of this technology starts to move upstream in the shopper journey? Because that's where I think we're going.
Deborah, you noticed that Chip earlier was talking about a concept around congestion, right? And you're talking about shopper anxiety. When you think about multiple self-service interfaces across the store, and by the way, we are showing here in this research there can be 10 boxes on here, right, of potential points of self-service interaction. But the reason this is important to have all of these points, or many, is because it removes the friction before it compounds. It gives customers the confidence to make decisions along the path. So when you move technology upstream, you're no longer solving for a single moment like checkout. You're enabling a connected journey across all of these multiple touch points, and that really does change behavior. I use the word confidence deliberately here. Confident shoppers have bigger baskets. They're getting through quicker. They're more likely to look back on that experience and say, you know, I would like to do that again, or that was very easy. And that kind of emotional response is critical, really, for loyalty and customer retention.
Chip, how do you think about this?
No, I just agree with Dan. I think he covered it well. I mean, these are a bunch of touch points, but there could be a lot more. And you know, it's all about how do you take those points of friction from a consumer point of view and alleviate them while tying it back into the store operations.
I like that concept, Dan, around the confidence from a shopper perspective, right? It's really they're going in knowing that they're going to have a great experience, as opposed to having anxiety around, you know, am I going to face friction here? Is the price going to be the price? And so I think the more that we can help them understand what that journey might look like, we're just going to see, you know, I think it's what Target showed, right? You're seeing higher net promoter scores, right? I mean, it's kind of like check, check, check. Everything is kind of moving in a positive direction. So as we look at the next set of data, which there is a lot of it, retailers are not just deploying one format, they're scaling multiple solutions because each one addresses different moments in the journey. And so what we're seeing is this idea around a shift from experimenting to scaling and testing. And I think that the data we showed earlier from different retailers illustrates that really well. So as we mentioned earlier, about 80% of planning to expand in the next 24 months. And what's interesting, in my opinion, is that while self-checkout really remains a top priority, newer formats like scan and go, kiosks, smart carts are not far behind. And going back to NRF this year, there was an earlier stage company that was in the smart cart, you know, industry, if you will, or technology solution. And every time I walk by, I mean, they were like 10, 15, 20 people deep, because you're seeing this is still early. And I think retailers and brands are starting to think about how this changes the customer journey. And so, you know, Dan, as you start to think about what's driving investment, not only what's driving it, but kind of like why now?
Hey, this one's easy, right? Merchants are in business to make money. So proven, repeatable return on investment, ROI at scale is the blueprint here, right? You know, these merchants are looking for greater throughput, reduced congestion. They can have measures on basket sizes. They can measure customer engagement now with a variety of sensors. You know, we're also seeing when a retailer has a successful initial pilot or an initial rollout, inevitably with a good ROI, that means more stores, more touch points, more solution types, all working together. One of the things that I've written down here when I was reading this report is that 64% of all retailers see a payback on self-service solutions within 2 years, 6 out of 10, right? And 95% within 36 months. You know, as someone who invests in, you know, technology on a daily basis, myself in our business here, those kind of ROIs are very attractive. So, you know, when you see scores like 80% of the respondents reported planning to expand in this area, this is the reason why. The ROIs are clear, and you know, but you have to be deliberate. You have to understand your customers. Piloting these solutions is crucial. The underlying and underpinning technology platform needs to be well understood by the enterprise already and used, right? You know, introducing net new point solutions that are not connected to that platform is not a great recipe. So that's what I would say about you know, ROI in this space.
So I'm gonna put a Wall Street lens on this, since we're in the heart of earnings season. those who are spending CapEx, not OpEx, are being rewarded. And so I think that's a very important point, because it is very difficult for investors to measure kind of AI right now. And so a lot of them are measuring it through CapEx investments. And I think that's a really interesting angle, and one that I will say we haven't seen in my lifespan as an analyst. And so I think that you're seeing an interest from retailers, brands, hospitality, QSR, to think about how can they start to change their spend as well, and what that means to Wall Street. So I think we're seeing a bit of a change. I think it's early, and I think it's going to be, I think this has a long tail. So that I think is going to be an interesting point. And Chip, what does scaling require from a technology perspective?
Well, we talked before about it's an integration challenge more than anything else. I mean, when you're trying to, there's part of scaling that is just how do you make it work within your system? How do you get it to efficiently connect to all the places it needs to? I mean, I think we kind of covered that. But there's another part about scaling, and you referred to it as the, like, hey, there's, and Dan as well, you got to start someplace, you got to pilot these things. One of the challenges we've seen that customers trip over is just the adoption, the getting customers to try the new thing, because we're all creatures of habit, and we walk in and we're going to grab the same basket that we usually do, and we're going to go about our day, and new things can be a little bit do I want to mess with that now? Do I really want to try that new thing now? And so I think retailers have to have a real plan of how they manage the change, how they get customers to try these new things. They won't automatically go there because they haven't tried it. They don't know it's more efficient. It's just strange. And getting them over that hump and getting them used to it and comfortable with it, I think is one of the big things that that really brings people with it. And when people see other folks using it, they're more apt to do it. So, but there's that initial adoption that they got to get over the top of. I will say, just looking at the slide, I kind of chuckled because, having 89% say, they've got self-checkout at least a store makes sense to me. 42% saying they've got smart carts. That seems a bit high in my world, but it might be a matter of the folks that we ask there, or they're just being a little optimistic about where they're going to get to.
Well, also might be how they define smart carts as well, right? I mean, I
suppose, yeah.
That could be right if you kind of duct tape and glue your phone on there. Maybe it's smart at this point. So, but I think you bring up, and I think actually, Chip, to your point, some retailers like Walmart will allow their managers to utilize social media, right, to talk about what's happening in store. And we've heard that when they can share with the community what they're doing, if there's something new and different about the physical aspect of the store, that ends up driving, right? Consumers are curious. And so in the right way, if that's communicated and, and explained, it can have an incredibly positive and I think exponential impact, because everyone wants to kind of come in and see what this experience is like. And so I think that's really interesting. But as we look at some of the data in red, right, the adoption rates are high across multiple formats. And so it's not about picking a winner. It's about, right, like I always think about portfolios. And so kind of for your customer, your location, it could even be different, geographically, right? We talked about earlier about LATAM. And so specific solutions serve different shopper needs, different formats, and different operational constraints. And so, Dan, how should retailers evaluate these different solutions against strategic needs and company characteristics? Because that's if you have a certain amount to spend, where do you start and how do you kind of go through that decision framework?
Now you're talking about impact metrics here, and we were previously just talking about adoption. One quick note on adoption, and I'll get to impact, but Chip was talking about, hey, how do you make these experiences highly visible and intuitive? And that for the first time use, that runtime has to be very, very quick and relatively simple. A lot of times some of these solutions right out of the gates are a bit over-engineered, and it's just high visibility, intuitive, quick, and fast. But in terms of impact metrics here that are in this report, I would say what stands out is that the impact expands as you move from isolated solutions to the connected journey. I mean, you can see that here just in the results. Checkout terminals are the baseline here, and self-service kiosks are a complement throughout the store, whether you're talking about product information or an endless aisle, or even workflow adders like buy online, pick up on store, or returns. As you go down the list here, these are just more connected experiences, right? So, more and more, if you can get this, interactive journey, step 1 through 10, fully connected, you're going to have a greater impact.
I mean, as we look across these numbers, Chip, and thinking about the operational impact, anything surprising or stand out to you?
Yeah, it's not 70% improvement on the checkout throughput. Nobody would be super surprised by that. That's what these self-service technologies were originally, put on the earth to do. So that is what you would expect. The surprising one to me was 77% improvement in out-of-stock detection. And this obviously comes because you're able to flex folks who would have been working at checkout, who would have been, directly working with a customer instead of self-service, and you're able to better manage your shelves. And we all know that, there's plenty of studies out there on the loyalty impact of not being able to get what you came for. And you have too many of those experiences where you're counting on picking up this one item at the grocery store and it's not there. And that's one of those, 3 strikes you're out type of thing before you're going to change and start going someplace else where you consistently do find what you need. Out of stock directly hits at that kind of loyalty impact. But it's also about your accuracy of your inventory overall, which is going to drive replenishment. It's going to drive overall store execution. It's going to drive loss of due to markdowns of having too much. So there's all these follow-on impacts. If you are able to really improve out-of-stock detection, it has a massive impact on the rest of your store operations.
So I want to thank, we've got a lot of questions between the chat and the Q&A, so I'll do my best to get to a few more. So John, I want to thank you because sometimes it's hard to bring up things that may shine a different light. And so he had said technology is great, but we are starting to lose the human element. Dan, how do you react to that, and how do you think about that in the context of our conversation?
It's not always super intuitive that self-service technologies actually improved human engagement. I mean, when routine, repetitive tasks get shifted to technology, and associates are no longer anchored to that technology point, but can freely move around the store to support customers, it's a huge benefit. They can engage earlier in the journey with customers. Associates can. They can help customers find products, make decisions, resolve issues. It's because they're mobile now, and they're multidisciplined and trained in multiple touch points. as Chip was mentioning earlier.
Right. And Mark asked, anything specific on digital discoverability in store? Have we kind of evolved past stack them high and watch them fly?
Well, you could see that, right? Some of the big box retailers are already specialized by department. So you think about, an area of the store that's all about connected home, right? All in-home technologies. And, that's a complex area where a lot of people do have anxiety about. And there's a lot of different products, whether you're talking about audio, visual, networking, personal productivity devices. And being confronted with a department like that without some sort of, hey, here's what's happening with these set of products. Here's how they can be used in store. Here's how customers are using them. Hey, let me click on this. I want to see a video of how easy it is to deploy this technology, how it helps my life. That is digital enablement in real time. And we are seeing customers use it's kind of in the self-service kiosk world, but they just look like screens that are interactive. And huge benefit to customer confidence, huge benefit to understanding exactly how different products and solutions can work together, and expanding kind of this digital helper experience in store.
I want a digital helper in the store. I like that. As we think about, I think this idea of how do we turn savings into higher value activities, to me is really critical. And as we look at some of these different technologies, one of the most immediate and measurable impacts we see is on labor. And the numbers are really concrete. I mean, this is from our research. This is where you can start to think about, right, the data to make decisions. So on average, 4 associates worth of capacity is freed per store, 22% of front store labor capacity, and that translates into about 184,000. We can round it up to 200,000 in annual value per store. So we're talking kind of real ROI, but that also allows, the retailers to invest in other things in the store, and it could even be different incentive programs, et cetera. So that to me is what I find such a huge opportunity, especially where we are right now, and going back to this idea of high turnover rates. So anything we can do to invest back in the associates, I think really that has a very high ROI. So Chip, how do you think retailers are using, freed up capacity?
Well, I think this slide does a nice job of kind of highlighting a lot of those major areas that they're shifting to. So it becomes kind of, obvious through the study. And I think what's important to say is if you're shifting people to merchandising and inventory, now you're directly addressing out of stock. You're directly addressing having the right selection and not having, missing products and everything faced, and that's a better experience, and you're going to be more likely to find what you came for. If you are shifting people into customer assistance, you're now all of a sudden providing a better customer experience that brings them back in the store, and you're complementing, as somebody had questioned, what about the human element? We are adding back more human element, but not in transactional ways, but more in a positive interface support way. And if we're adding more staff into fulfillment and omni-channel, we're making that part of the business run smoother and faster, and being able to deliver things in a more rapid manner to folks that want to use that kind of fulfillment. So look, there's lots of benefits to where you can shift this labor. We've worked with customers. We have a great case study on Lowe's of helping them. That's a place where everyone goes in and expects. Oftentimes, they need to have customer interface with the employees, because they've got real questions about whatever project they're working on. And Lowe's had a challenge where they were only having about 40% of their time really focused on customer support, customer interaction. And we were able to work with them and look at ways that we could invest in technology for the associates, for self-service, that brought that up to now 60% of the retail associates' time is spent working directly with end customers. And that's massive in terms of the experience that you get when you leave the store.
I think Home Depot's always said it best, right? Kind of going from tasking to selling. And that's, that's why people are working retail, right? They enjoy helping others. And so I think that, Chip, helping us level set and remind us about that is really important. And Dan, how do you think about this from a kind of customer experience perspective?
Well, it goes both ways, right? Anybody that's been in the kind of customer service world knows that when the folks that are providing service and support are themselves satisfied and feel good about their jobs, they typically transfer that onto, the customer. So in the retail world, we're talking about freeing employees to engage in high impact, value added engagement with a customer. It's just a different kind of engagement. And for the customer here, they're going to get a non-distracted employee, right? They're going to get someone who is ready to help at the right time. And, in the old world, without all of these supporting self-service technologies, doing repetitive, repeatable tasks or tasks that, customers kind of want to linger on and spend their own time with, without that, they're, as I mentioned earlier, they're just anchored to their transaction spot. So this is a huge opportunity and a sea change impact on labor that we see in with our customers.
Thanks. And I'm going to kind of kick off the next slide with a question from John. How do you minimize fraud shrinkage when deploying a self-service solution? So either Dan or Chip.
Go ahead, Dan.
Fraud and shrinkage. Well, you know what? I'll tell you, in self-service, this is a big issue, right? You have customers or merchants or retailers are looking to gain these efficiencies, but at the same time, in a non-checkout, the man checkout world, there is opportunities for fraud and shrinkage. So as we look forward, there is a whole host of net new technologies around object and image recognition, shrink mitigation through technology. Just this year at the National Retail Federation store in January, both Zebra and Elo were demonstrating incredible gains in object and image recognition in a self-checkout environment. And, in this area, it's not about, misscans only. It's about behavior. It's about understanding how a customer handles a product. For half or more of the shrink that happens in these kind of applications, it's inadvertent. The customer and the technology is just not working and syncing together. So, there is an incredible opportunity moving forward, utilizing some of these sensor technologies. Elo's working with software partners and our own software teams on these technologies today. And, we expect to be helping customers with this really important, challenge, right, in the business today.
So this is like full confessions here. So in high school, I worked at Kroger, and one of the challenges was, right, at the bottom of the cart, you as the associate couldn't see necessarily over and under. And, reminding us, I think it was on like a weekly basis, right, to, kind of walk around, like look under the cart, but that didn't feel like kind of a natural sales process, right? And so I think there are many opportunities where, right, whether there's kind of a person checking you out or whether it's self-checkout, where the consumer just misses it or forgets, especially in this day and age of, right, like bring your own bag, right? So you're putting all of your items in your own bag, but you might have stuff from like several of your shopping journeys. And so it's all in the same bag and you're trying to dig out. I mean, I've seen this happen multiple times. And so I think that in many cases, it's just kind of maybe people feel that there's somebody behind them in line that they have to speed up, et cetera. But I think that there are many opportunities to help retailers. We had a question, I know we're running short on time, but I thought it was an important one. Thank you, Jillian. Self-service checkout is only one opportunity for retailers. What about self-serve BOPUS pickups and returns? Surely that's an opportunity too, but it doesn't look like retailers are investing in doing this? Question mark.
Well, we are seeing that, right? So the adoption of locker technology, self-service locker technology, and self-service kiosks in returns is emerging, and we're seeing more of it. The last thing you want to see is a queue. When you arrive at the store to return an item, you want, like you're not shopping anymore. This is more of like a utility in your life. You just need to get something done. And so enhancing throughput and reducing friction there is really critical. And we are seeing customers begin to adopt it. It's just emerging right now.
Yeah, we're seeing that in many cases that lockers work really well when the customer wants to get something at 5 a.m. and let's say the store opens at 8 or 9. And so it's kind of those early mornings or late evenings. And I know there are some concerns at a locker, right? You miss this opportunity to engage with the customer. But I think it goes back to allowing the customer to kind of be serviced in the way that they want to be. So we're at, I think we have all of 1 minute. So Dan and Chip, if together you can help us think about how can self-service be transformed into a platform, because I truly think that this is where we're headed.
I would say self-service is becoming a core operating platform for retailers today. Checkout is becoming distributed and hopefully invisible to a lot of customers where it actually happens, right? It just needs to feel at the right time, at the right place, and not all, congested at the end of a process. I feel like AI is a potential here to, transform transactions into intelligent data collection points on the journey, and the combination of associate tools and customer tools, these are all being blended together. So it all creates an amazing opportunity for data collection at each point, personalization, the enhancement of that customer journey. I'd probably leave it at that and leave a little top up from Chip here at the end.
No, I think you covered it really well, Dan. So couldn't agree more.
Great. Thanks, everyone. We're sorry that we didn't get to everyone's questions, but they were great. And we have the report dropped into the chat. Anything else that we can do, Chip, Dan, or myself, we're here to help. Thanks, Chip and Dan. This is great. I really enjoyed this. And there's so much more to talk about.
Thanks, Deborah.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Bye.